And I would ask you to take a look at, for instance, chapter 56 of Isaiah, particularly verses 4 to 8. So in verse 4, the prophet says, "For thus says the Lord, to the eunuchs who keep my Sabbaths, who choose the things that please me, and hold fast to my covenant, I will give in my house and within my walls a monument and a name, better than sons and daughters. I will give them an everlasting name that shall not be cut off." Now, according to the laws in the book of Leviticus, a eunuch, that is, a man whose testicles have been removed, was disqualified from participation in the temple ritual. This prophet is saying, forget about it, right? Even the eunuch who keeps my Sabbaths, who chooses the things that please me and hold fast to my covenant. I want you to keep your focus on that word Sabbath, on who keep my Sabbath, who choose the things that I choose, that God chooses, and holds fast the covenant. That person has a place in God's house, in my house. And it goes on, it says, "And the foreigners who join themselves to the Lord, to minister to him, to love the name of the Lord, and to be his servants, all who keep the Sabbath, and do not profane it, and hold fast my covenant, these I will bring to my holy mountain," to the temple, "and make them joyful in my house of prayer. Their burnt offerings and their sacrifices will be accepted on my altar, for my house shall be called a house of prayer for all peoples." So foreigners will be welcomed into the temple. Their burnt offerings will be welcomed on the altar in the temple. The temple will, in effect, become a temple for all people. And there's another passage here. I don't know if I had assigned it or not. But there's another passage in Isaiah chapter 58 where the prophet is now, and this is where I say some people think maybe there might be a third Isaiah. And this is why some people think that perhaps we have a third Isaiah. We see a prophet beginning here around chapter 58 who seems a little disgruntled. He's complaining now that people are not, really doing exactly what he would think they should be doing. For instance, if you go to chapter 58 of Isaiah, verse 2, he says, "Yet day after day they seek me and delight to know my ways, as if they were a nation that practiced righteousness." And then in verse 3 he goes, "Why do we fast but you do not see?" This is people asking God, "Why humble ourselves but you do not notice?" And then he goes on in verse 6, he says, "Is not this the fast?" I'm sorry, in verse 5, he says, "Is such a fast that I choose," this is God speaking, "is such the fast that I choose, a day to humble oneself? Is it to bow down the head like a bulrush, and to lie in sackcloth and ashes? Will you call this a fast, a day acceptable to the Lord? Is not this the fast that I choose? To loose the bonds of injustice, to undo the thongs of the yoke, to let the oppressed go free, and to break every yoke? Is it not to share your bread with the hungry, and bring the homeless poor into your house? When you see the naked, to cover them, and not hide them yourself from your own kin? Then your light will break forth like the dawn, and your healing shall spring." So again, this classic prophetic complaint that it's not about just ritual, but it's what kind of community that you're forming in terms of social justice and how you treat each other. And then if you see in verse 13, "If you refrain from trampling the Sabbath, from pursuing your own interests on my holy day, if you call the Sabbath a delight and the holy day of the Lord honorable, if you honor it, not going your own ways, serving your own interests, or pursuing your own affairs, then you shall take delight in the Lord, and I will make you ride upon the heights of the earth. I will feed you with the heritage of your ancestor Jacob, for the mouth of the Lord has spoken." So we see that there is this optimism in chapter 56 that even the eunuch or the foreigner is welcome into the temple. But I want you to keep in mind this idea, but the Sabbath is very important, and also here in chapter 58, a little bit of disgruntlement, not satisfied with the way the people are reacting. They're going through the motions, they're going through the ritual, but they're not treating each other properly. And again, that mention of the Sabbath, and that's going to come up later, and I'll come back to it. But then by the time you get to chapter 66, we have what I would call a very disgruntled prophet. So I don't know whether we have a third Isaiah or we have a second Isaiah who was at first very optimistic and very upbeat and very positive, but by the time he gets to the end of his work and seeing what's happening in the community, he's no longer satisfied. He says in chapter 66, "Thus says the Lord, heaven is my throne and the earth is my footstool. What is the house that you would build for me, and what is my resting place?" So now again you have this temple, you have this house, but it's not operating the way I, the prophet, speaking in the name of God, would have it operate. He goes on in verse 3, "Whoever slaughters an ox is like the one who kills a human being. Whoever sacrifices a lamb, like one who breaks a dog's neck. Whoever presents a grain offering, like one who offers swine. Whoever makes a memorial offering of frankincense, like one who blesses an idol. These have chosen their own ways, and in their abominations they take delight." So, in other words, you're slaughtering the ox, you're making a sacrifice in the temple, but you might as well be committing murder. You're sacrificing a lamb, which would be an acceptable animal to offer on the altar in the temple, but you might as well be breaking a dog's neck, which would be an unacceptable offering. You offer grain offering like one who offers swine's blood. Pig blood, pigs could not be offered. Pigs were not acceptable offerings. So he's somewhat disgruntled. And if you go to the end of this book of Isaiah, you'll see that he's very disgruntled. And again, he offers a more idealistic and ideal vision of a much more universal vision of what it means to be the covenant people, that he sees in a kind of eschatological vision, an end-time vision. At the end of the chapter, he talks about people coming from all over the world to worship in his holy mountain, in God's holy mountain in Jerusalem. This is in verse 20. And then he says in verse 22, "For as the new heavens and the new earth which I will make shall remain before me, says the Lord, so shall your descendants in your name remain. From new moon to new moon, and from Sabbath to Sabbath, all flesh shall come to worship before me, says the Lord." And so he's offering an end vision, an ideal vision of a much more universalistic vision of the community where people are coming from all over the world to worship God in Jerusalem. Now, we can call that universalistic, but notice that it's universalistic, but people are coming to Jerusalem to worship. So it's a universal vision, but it's a particular vision also, in that it's going to take place at the temple in Jerusalem. It's not going to take place at a temple in Egypt or at a temple in Babylon, but it's going to take place at the temple in Jerusalem. But it is certainly a much more universalistic vision than the very particularistic vision that we see in the book of Ezra, and it could very well be that this Isaiah's, this prophet's disgruntlement, evolving disgruntlement, is indeed a reaction to the more particularistic and more narrow vision of the covenant community that is being played out in the province of Judea, the Persian province of Judea, under the leadership of the priests in the temple, Ezra and the other priests in the temple, who may have had a much narrower vision of this covenant community. You may really be seeing something of a a division, a tension between prophetic voices on the one hand and priestly voices on the other hand. And it turns out that the priestly voices win, that the prophetic voice recedes at this point. And what we see then is, as I say, a temple-centered community ruled by priests.